I was born and raised in University Hills, which is sort of the north tip, although our district does extend down to Pflugerville, I believe, where Samsung is. Samsung is actually in District 1. I've been away for quite some time in school. I attended Yale and Oxford, where I studied philosophy, government, and social policy. I recently served as an Asia 21 young leader, and I traveled to South Korea and met North Koreans and talked about a lot of the issues facing Asia and the West, the relationship essentially between the two parts of the world. My father's from Iran, and my mother's from generations of Texans. So my mom grew up in a Christian family and my father grew up in a Muslim family. So I know a little bit about diversity and about the importance of welcoming immigrants in Austin. Austin was a very welcoming place to my father in the 1970s, and I would really hate to see that change. I know a lot of longtime residents want newcomers to sort of get out of here, but I think that it would be a real shame if we lost that welcoming spirit. What else? I came back to Austin after school and was very disappointed to see that a lot of the growth and development was not equitably distributed across the city. So essentially, the environmental resources in East Austin have not been protected to the degree that they need to be. And that's really wrong because we have young kids who swim in creeks and various things on the east side. And so when we have a lot of growth and development upstream of those creeks, essentially the pollution runs down into the water, or when it floods, the former dump sites flood into the water, and that can have really serious health consequences. So I felt that the incumbent right now serving District 1 hasn't addressed environmental issues quite to the degree that they need to be addressed, and she's been responsive, but I think the whole city has not really given the attention it needs to give to the east side, and in particular to the east side's water resources.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question. Why are you running? Is that why you felt like there hasn't been enough attention to the environment?
Well, yeah, but also I think that we need to increase efficiency in the city. But I emailed the watershed department and said there are various environmental resources like springs that needed to be added to the city's database. And that database is what developers reference in order to know where they're allowed to develop and where they're not. And the city's like, actually, we depend on the developers to add the environmental resources to the database. So what that means is that sometimes you have developers ignoring the environmental resources or filling in caves and doing other things that wouldn't be PC for an environmentalist. So I think we need a separate process for determining and identifying our environmental resources. It doesn't make any sense to me that the city relies on developers to actually identify those resources. It's very strange. So that was one reason. The lack of response from the city regarding various complaints and pollution episodes was another motivation for getting into the race. And finally, when I'm looking at my opponents, I'm hearing a lot that sounds like it's a repetition of the status quo in Austin, and I think we need a change a little bit, and I wasn't convinced that the platforms of my opponents would really bring that change.
Okay. What else can I ask you about? And this may have been the answer to your last question, but what do you see the biggest challenge is for District 1?
Well, there are a lot of challenges, but again, recognition is a really important one. Our future plan, Imagine Austin, it's a 30-year plan for the city, but when you actually read through it, you can see that the East Side did not participate in making that plan. Even if there are groups on the East Side that are listed as participating, it's not written from the perspective of an East Sider, and the result of that is that the planning for the city has not really taken into account the viewpoint and perspectives of longtime residents on the East Side. So the biggest challenge, I think, is really getting a seat at the table and actually getting city leaders to care about the well-being and the needs of the East Side residents. Right now, we have just sort of ignoring long-time social problems that need to be addressed, and addressed. And I think that at this point, in 2018, we can't continue to do that. We really do have to give vulnerable citizens a seat at the table.
Okay. Gentrification is always a big talk
Yeah.
on the east side. What's your take on that? What's the solution?
Well, it's again related to Imagine Austin. So if you look at the areas where there's been a lot of gentrification in the east side, you can see that the city actually planned these areas to be so-called desired zones of development. So the gentrification is a result of planning. And when there's equitable distribution of both resources and development, then you don't have areas that are really subject to massive growth and gentrification. We don't want to be kicking out longtime residents, in particular African Americans, because it really smacks of 1960s urban renewal, which was really condemned and considered very racist. So I think that we need to not repeat the past.
Okay. That may be it. I mean, we talked about some issues there. Any other issues that have been hot button issues at council that you want to talk about?
Yes. I'm very disappointed with the Major League Soccer stadium deal. I think that we cannot be giving tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. Given that our city is closing pools, raising the cost to enter the pools, we could really use the money that would come from taxing corporations and wealthy people who want to come move to the city. We could really use that money. So this model of attracting businesses from out of state to Austin needs to be adapted somewhat. I think that we should really be looking at Opportunity Austin, which is a Chamber of Commerce program which has essentially attracted all of the tech companies here. It's not so much that tech companies are bad, but simply that we want them to contribute more to the well-being of citizens in Austin.